This past summer, for the first time since the Chiefs of Ontario came into being in 1975, a woman has been elected to lead the organization. She is RoseAnne Archibald, chief of the Taykwa Tagamou Nation, that is a Cree community in northeastern Ontario, and a former deputy grand chief of the Anishinaabe Nation. Her official title is Regional Chief, and it now falls to her to steer the work of this political and advocacy body representing 133 First Nations communities in Ontario. And she joins us now on taking the helm of the Chiefs of Ontario. Welcome to our studio and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You were a guest on our program that we did in Sudbury just a few months before the election. I'm sure there was no connection between the appearance on that program and your victory, right?
I don't know, Steve.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Well, let's lay this out. What are your top priorities now that you're the top dog?
Well, for me, the organization has a large deficit, so I have to really focus on stabilizing the organization, fixing problems that are inherent in the system, and creating a healthy, stable organization. That's one of my priorities.
You're $1 million in debt, more than $1 million.
Yeah, 1.3.
1.3.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that?
Well, some of it's been done already, so some of it is ongoing. So my goal is by March 31st to be back to zero, so to speak, in a balanced state. So that's the goal there.
But do you have powers of taxation? Do you go around to the 133 different bands and say, we need more?
No.
No, what do you do?
Well, you have to save. You have to spend wisely and manage wisely. So that's what we're doing.
You, as I mentioned, 133 different First Nations communities around the province. This just in, not all necessarily rowing in the same direction. How do you bring unity to a group that diverse?
Well, you have to be respectful. Each community has their own priorities, and sometimes those priorities, you find the common ground among them, and you do your best to move forward on those commonalities. And where there aren't commonalities, obviously you can't move forward. So it's about finding common goals with people and being respectful of their processes.
Give us an example of a common goal you think you can reach.
Well, one of the things that I have always believed is that First Nations need to begin to build wealth. So they need to have prosperity in their communities. That's a really important thing to build a healthy community, that they have jobs and opportunities for work, and that they have their own source funding so that they can have a community government that is funded properly and has, builds a healthy community, essentially.
How tough do you think it's going to be to make that happen?
Well, I think in some cases it's already happening.
Where?
My own community, for example, we've negotiated a number of deals in forestry, mining, hydro development, and that funding actually accounts for more than the government funding that we actually get.
Speaking of the government, I presume that part of what will make you successful is an ability to work with and improve relations with the new government of Ontario. And I'm wondering if you've had a chance to meet with Premier Ford yet?
I've had a couple of interactions with him, and after October 1st, I'm going to have my first meeting with him, and we're firming that up, so I'm hoping that happens in early October. I do have a good working relationship with Greg Rickford, who's the Minister of Indigenous Affairs, Energy, and so...
Well, hang on. It's more than that, actually, as you know, Chief.
Yeah.
Under the previous government, the Liberal government, there was a standalone Ministry of Indigenous, I think it was called Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. The new government has taken reconciliation out of the title of the ministry, and Greg Rickford, whom you just mentioned, from Kenora, he is the Minister of Indigenous Affairs, he is the Minister of Energy, Mines, Northern Development, Natural Resources, Economic Development for Northern Ontario, FedNor. Do you feel like you are less important to this government's agenda, given all of the things that he has on his plate?
I don't know if it's about not being important. I know that he has a lot on his plate, and can he focus on us specifically? I think we're tied into all of those things. When it comes to energy, hydro development, mining, those things affect First Nations. So to me, I always think about the opportunity of having the ability to talk to those three ministries at the same time.
So in some respects, you may have one-stop shopping with Greg Rickford in a way that you didn't with the previous government, where you may have had to meet with 2 or 3 or 4 ministers to get something done. Am I reading that right?
That's right. That's how I see it.
That's how you see it. Now, you're seeing that because you are a positive person who's trying to put a good, a good patina on things. But could the reality be something different?
You know, I don't know, because the practice so far is that I have a good relationship with Minister Rickford, and we're building that relationship. And over time, we're going to see where it goes. I mean, whether it gets better or stays the same. I mean, it's hard to tell right now. It's early, right?
Sure, but yeah, but one of the very first things that the new Ford government did when it came in was cancel that opportunity for teachers to gather and learn more about Indigenous education so that they could go back into their classrooms and improve what is taught. They canceled that. What did you think of that?
Well, it was the writing sessions that were canceled, that's what I understood. And we did immediately reach out to the Minister of Education, and we were told that it was mainly a financial decision, but that those curriculum writing sessions would continue at some point in the future, and we're still waiting to hear on that. So we haven't heard that that process is totally canceled.
I'm not looking for trouble here, you understand, but I do want to ask you whether the first Indigenous-related move that a new government makes, which is to cancel something that teachers had been expecting and were in fact en route to Toronto to participate in, I mean, what kind of signal do you think that sends?
Well, it wasn't a good signal, and people definitely were up in arms about it. And I believe that over time, we're going to see where the curriculum writing sessions go, and I'm waiting to hear on that, and we'll proceed.
We shall see. I don't want to invade your privacy here, but you have been public about some of the challenges in your own background, and I want to talk about that if you don't mind right now. Can you talk about your grandparents? Let's start there.
Well, I can talk about my grandfather, because that story I've told a few times. My grandfather was a chief in our community from 1921 till 1948, so about 28 years around there. And he actually passed away on his way to pick up my dad, who also was a chief in our community. He wasn't the chief then, he was about 10 years old.
Where was he at the time?
In residential school. And so it was my dad and his two siblings were in residential school. My grandpa was on his way to pick them up, and he drowned because that was the system of transportation. It was in the river. That's how you got around in the north back in the day.
How old was he when he died, your grandfather?
I think he was like maybe in his late 40s, early 50s. I don't know the full details.
And your father, of course, was in a residential school. So you have, I don't want to, be overly melodramatic about this, but you've got some tragedy in your background that you have had to deal with through your life. How have you done that?
Well, I've had to do my own healing process. My parents had to do their own healing process. I mean, this is intergenerational trauma, so it's not unique to me. This has happened to many people in our communities. And it's an ongoing process. It's a part of the colonization process. It's a part of the assimilation process, the destruction of families. It's ongoing. And for me, I've had to really, so for example, my dad, he suffered a lot as a result of not only did his dad die, but a year later his mom died. So he was an orphan.
At about the age of 11, if I recall.
Yeah, and so he, didn't have models for parenting and had to figure out ways to cope with his own trauma. And he was an alcoholic. I don't mind telling people that he struggled with alcohol, which is an issue that, again, is prevalent in our communities.
That's how he coped with residential school.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is that my mom, at one point when I was about 10, said to my dad, okay, this is not working, and we have to change our lives. Our lives have to be improved. You have to not drink in our house. There's not going to be violence in our house. She kind of set down the rules of how we were going to begin to heal as a family.
How did he react to that?
He actually fell into line. He actually agreed with her. I think that he was also searching for healing himself. And so our lives were really transformed in that moment. And I think, again, that's a universal story for First Nations women who say, okay, this is enough. It's enough trauma and enough drama, and we want to begin to heal. And our family did begin to heal at that point.
You said at the beginning of that answer, though, that you had to go through your own healing journey yourself. What was that a reference to?
Well, I had to forgive my dad. I had to look at what was happening with my parents. Why was I raised the way I was raised? I had to understand colonization. I had to understand the impact of residential schools. And I had to really do like therapy and counseling and those kinds of things and bring myself to a state where I could forgive not only my dad, but maybe that larger process that's happening for First Nations, and begin to heal this part of myself so that I can be whole and that I can be a contributing, positive person in society.
Would you say that you are healed?
No.
It's an still
it's an ongoing process.
Ongoing process.
Yeah. I do feel healthier, though, as time goes on.
You are expecting this question, so I'm going to ask it. How important is it to you to be the first female chief in Ontario history?
Very important. And not only for me, though. I've said this many times. When I won, I could see women in the audience, because the way the election happens, excuse me, is all the chiefs line up behind you. And so there were women out there that I could see that were beginning to cry, as on the last ballot I could tell that I had won. And that was a really momentous feeling, to know that this victory wasn't just mine, but it was for all the women that were in that room, and all the women in Ontario, First Nations women, and maybe other women too.
You know that it is a somewhat controversial, excuse me, it is a somewhat controversial point to say that women lead differently than men. Mm-hmm. There are some people who just don't believe that once you get to the position, you have to lead in a certain way. Mm-hmm. Do you think women lead in a different way than men do?
Well, I can only talk about my own experience. And my experience is that I'm a heart-centered leader.
A heart-centered leader?
Heart-centered leader.
Which means what?
So I have been a leader for almost 30 years. And, there's political strategy and political knowledge, and those things are important in politics. That's not where I lead from, though. I actually really care about people. I think about the love and care that I have, that sacred responsibility that I have to people, and that is to give that love and that care to people and extend that to people, because that is what actually moves us forward. That's what heals me. That's what helps others to heal. Is
that a RoseAnne Archibald approach to leadership, or is that a female approach to leadership?
I can only say it's mine. But I do know that, I deal with a number of women chiefs across Ontario, and there is a different approach, I would say, for women in leadership, because many of the women that I know are mothers or grandmothers, and they live in that place of love. They live from that place of loving their children and their grandchildren, and that extends into the community. So I can say that I see that happening.
Having said that, I don't want to overdo this, but having said that, Margaret Thatcher went to war, Indira Gandhi went to war, Golda Meir went to war. There are other female leaders in the settler culture, if you like, for whom a military approach is there at the end of the day. Is that not an option for you?
I don't know about military, but I do know that if there is something that's really damaging, or something that I know is can be really harmful to our communities, then I'm prepared to stand up and do something about it.
Direct action?
Direct action.
And direct action means different things to different people, so let's clarify that. Direct action could mean,
let me
bombing
give you
train tracks.
Oh, no,
You're not going to do that.
That's too extreme.
Okay.
But people know me. They know that I have an activist background. When I was a chief, in order to get a forestry company to come and negotiate with us, we had to block a logging road. We had to block highways. We had to do those kinds of things in order to let people know that we had rights. So that's what I'm talking about. Things that are done in a peaceful manner, things that are done from a place of peace.
So that kind of thing, blocking train tracks, blocking roads, hunger strikes, like in Idle No More, that is part of your toolkit?
No. That's not part of my toolkit.
That
is a part of what I have done in the past. So when I talk about direct action, I'm talking about peaceful forms of protest, and those are things I have done in the past.
But would not advocate in the future?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
I'm trying to pin you down, and I understand that you're. I get that you want to sort of keep your options open here, but it seems to me that in all of the conversations I've had with Indigenous leaders in this province and country, there comes a point where the frustration at the lack of attention that you get from settler governments is such that negotiation doesn't cut it anymore. It requires in the view of those I've spoken to, It requires a more intense form of whatever. I guess I'm trying to figure out whether or not that whatever is part of your toolkit at some point down the road.
Well, here's the bottom line. I have to be able to negotiate a peaceful settlement. That's the bottom line. That's absolutely always what I'm heading for as a leader. To me, if you have to take direct action as a form on the road to negotiation, then that has to happen. But the goal is to negotiate something that is a win-win, something that creates peace, that creates prosperity, that creates mutual understanding and respect. That's my goal.
And you think that's possible?
Yes.
You do? Because obviously, again, other Indigenous leaders have become so frustrated that they say it's virtually impossible to make that happen. You're not there.
No.
Do you consider yourself a disruptor?
Yes.
You do? Because you sound very diplomatic the way we're talking here tonight. What makes you a disruptor?
Well, I'm in a role that is that's a woman has never held this position before, and to me, you're disrupting a process, disrupting the status quo by holding space, and I've done that continually in my career. I've been the first woman chief in my community, the first woman deputy grand chief, the first woman grand chief of the Crees in Ontario, and now the first woman regional chief. So I'm definitely moving into areas that have not, always had space for women.
You know Ted Nolan?
Yes.
Ted Nolan, for viewers who may not know, is a former, thought about being Grand Chief of the Assembly of First Nations. He's a Stanley Cup, I think he contended for the Stanley Cup as a coach in the National Hockey League. I guess he's from around Sault Ste. Marie originally. And I remember asking him, what would you rather be? Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Prime Minister of Canada, or Stanley Cup champion? And he said, why not all three? So I'm going to ask you a similar kind of question. Do you have any aspirations to eventually enter the field in kind of Ontario or Canadian elective politics?
I don't look that far ahead. I try and take it a term at a time because politics, as you know, is a very, very difficult business. And our family has a long history in it. And so I don't sort of plan because, you just sometimes feel like, okay, that's enough. I think I need a break now. So I try not to jump too far ahead.
I asked the question because, of course, in the United States, when a black man finally became the president, at the time, there were many people who said, finally, America is starting to come to terms with its great shame of slavery and race relations and so on. And I've often wondered, who will be the Indigenous leader who will eventually become Premier or Prime Minister someday and help deal with Canada's colonial past? And I wonder if you ever think you're that person.
I see people who can do that, like Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould. She's the Attorney General in the federal government. I mean, she's already within that system. There are a number of Indigenous leaders provincially, like Sol Mamakwa, people
Ontario NDP
in Ontario
member.
NDP. Yeah, there are First Nation people within the system that are working toward that. So maybe it'll be them.
Or maybe you. I'm being mischievous here. In our last minute, if you would be so kind as to complete the following sentence. I will consider my term as regional chief for the Chiefs of Ontario to have been successful if what?
First Nations have the ability to build wealth and have prosperity.
Period, full stop. That's the key goal.
Yeah, well, that's one of the top.
One of the top.
Yeah.
We're so glad you could spare some time for us tonight here at TVO to come in and share your views. It's good to see you again. Congratulations, and we wish you well with your new responsibilities.
Thank you, Steve.
That's RoseAnne Archibald, the regional chief for the Chiefs of Ontario.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.